Okay, so this week we talked about our integumentary system, and here's just kind of my little diagram of it. So, of course, we have our epidermis up top, which is our thin layer of tightly packed epithelial cells. We then have our dermis, which is our connective tissue, nervous tissue, collagen, which helps in our elasticity, our nerve, and the nerve center, which helps send out those impulses. We do have blood flow through our dermis, our sweat gland, which helps us maintain homeostasis by reducing our body heat, and then our hair follicles, which helps maintain homeostasis by keeping in body heat. And then finally at the bottom we have our subcutaneous tissue, which is where a lot of our fat is stored, so a lot of fat down here. And that's just kind of a brief overlook there. So moving on. We wanted to discuss the differences and similarities between the epidermis and dermis. And so the epidermis, of course, is the top layer, whereas the dermis is the middle layer. The epidermis has those tightly packed epithelial cells, and compared to our other layers of skin, the epidermis is pretty thin. The dermis has the connective tissue, collagen, nervous tissues, blood in it, and it's much thicker. And then, of course, the epithelial or the epidermis doesn't have blood flow to it. The main way that they're alike is in their function. They're both there to help protect our bodies. They both help protect from infectious agents getting into our skin, and also protect from dehydration and helping us maintain homeostasis. So our next question was about people who have darker skin tones and live closer to the equator. That is a genetic change over time. They're at the equator. They have more sunlight, more UV radiation, which of course can affect the pigments in their skin and cause and the cells in their epidermis and melanocytes, and cause different types of skin cancer and gene changes. So over time they've adapted, and their melanocytes produce more melanin, which then gives them that darker color, and that protects them from the UV radiation more and from those mutations. And then we are moving on to the ways your body heals. So there are several steps if you get a wound or a cut. First, of course, if you get a cut, it's going to start bleeding. A blood clot will form and a scab, and that's going to help from you bleeding out and also any other infectious agents getting into the wound. And then we go to inflammation, which is when those macrophages and phagocytes and everything come up to that wound site, and they try to engulf any infectious diseases and the debris and take it away. That's also when your skin tends to get inflamed and swollen and red. And then that moves us to proliferation, when the fibroblasts are proliferating and new tissue is starting to heal and be laid down and form. And then we go on to the remodeling process, which is when all the tissue finishes healing and it kind of mimics the other cells around it to really show a fully healed wound. So, and then the next thing we discussed was tattoos, and how, if tattoos are injuries to our body, how does the ink remain? So again, that is done by the tattoo needle, of course, and the foreign object, which is the ink, being inserted into your dermal layer, into your dermis. The body does recognize that as a wound, so it sends those macrophages to the area, which try to eat up the ink and destroy it, but they are usually unable to. And so they tend to die there with the ink, and then that ink becomes bonded with our connective tissue and stays there as long as that connective tissue survives, and then you can see that through the layers of your skin in the form of the tattoo. So then we then went on to cancer cells. And we have the two different types of skin cancer, the cutaneous carcinoma, which is when the unpigmented epithelial cells get mutated. And then you also have the cutaneous melanoma, which is when the melanocytes get infected or get altered and mutated. And they have, the melanin has irregular outlines, which is how we know they're mutated. So this is usually caused by being in the sun a lot, having high exposure to UV radiation, maybe having lots of sunburns or blistering sunburns. Anything like that can cause these mutations and skin cancer. One of the ways they check for skin cancer is just a visual check, just a screening. Some people will go in on a set basis, whether that be every few days or months or just once a year, to get their body checked over for these. They have what they call the ABCs of it, where they're checking the area of concern for asymmetry. They're checking the border of the area, the color of the area, the diameter to see if it's growing or not. And then we also are watching just the evolution of it over time, how it's changing, whether it's getting smaller or bigger, changing in the colors, just kind of how it changes over time. So that's a lot of the stuff we learned this week.